Hello everyone. Today we're going to talk about some very basic concepts of Oracle 12c and 19c and database administration and what a DBA normally does and what's the very basic concepts about database management system. So let's get started. Okay. Um, so what is actually database? So database is a place where you store all your data. It's organized collection of information. Data is nothing but information that treated as a unit. So if you collect all your personal information about yourself, like your name, date of birth, your driver license number, your address, your phone number, all those are data about yourself, personal data, and that can be stored in a database for retrieval for different using for different purposes. and and we have been using database for a very long time, for thousands of years, uh, not in a software format, but let's say before we had software and computers, uh, a shopkeeper used to keep a note of all his inventory purchases and stocks, everything in a notebook, in a piece of paper. And so the drawback with that is it is not scalable. You cannot collect a lot of data and manage a lot of data manually with a pen and paper. So when everybody started using computers and different data, the different company came up with their database software product, um, then it was possible to store the same information in a database, in a database which is where you can store a lot of data. You can manage it more efficiently, and it will give you better performance, and you can scale up your operation. So that's the whole purpose of it. Automating, in a way we are automating the storage and retrieval of data, which we used to do in a very manual and slow pace, and which was not scalable. You cannot store a lot of data in your paper and pen format, and this was much more efficient. And so a lot of companies, instead of uh, managing their data in a in physical, in a pen and paper, they started, they thought it would be a good idea for their business to store the information in this software uh, product called database. So that's how this and what is a database management system? So just storing a data in a place is not enough. You need a very efficient and automated way of retrieving the data, organization of data, protect your data, and also efficiently store your data. So that's what it is, a database management system. It's basically a software which facilitate or which takes care of storing, organization, retrieval of data in a very uh, easy and efficient way. So it has basically always three components: a kernel code, which is the software binary code which takes care of data management, data protection, data retrieval, and everything. And there's the repository of metadata. It's like the metadata is like when you store a lot of data in a database. To manage it, you also need to maintain metadata. It's the data about the data, like how many tables you have, how many columns you have in each table, what are those columns, what is the size of the columns. So all this information you need to store in your own internal tables to efficiently manage the actual application data. So you need a metadata also, and there is a query language. Of course, you need a means of communication with the database. So every database management system has a query language. It's like a you can call it a programming language or commands, but you can use to communicate with the database. You can save data, you can retrieve data, you can update the data, you can delete the data. All those things you need a query language that is also available in database management system. So there are a lot of way people thought of efficiently storing the data, because in early days, um, s- storage disk storage was not cheap. It is expensive, and also the computers, the server didn't have very high processing power. So it is very important to come up with a way how we can efficiently store the data so that you don't take up a lot of space and doesn't take a lot of memory on CPU, but you can still do our operation. So a lot of people came up with different models. There are some models which people started using it, which is hierarchical. It has like one parent record has one or more child records, similar to a file system, and there's a networking model. But is this own drawbacks, which was not very scalable. It was very difficult to update, change the data definition. That means the table structure. Once it is decided, and there was no query language existed. So there are a lot of problems with that. I mean, people still used it, but it had a lot of drawbacks. The next one, which people are still using, which is very efficient, it is widely acceptable. That is relational database. That is still used, and it's very popular. Relational model, uh, relational database management system (RDBMS) is based on a relational model concept, which was defined in 1970 by E.F. Codd. So he came up with certain rules that you need to satisfy to become a relational database. Basically, in a relational database, the data is stored in a relational table or called relations. So the table is a two-dimensional representation of a relation in the form of rows and columns. So data is stored in terms of rows and columns, and so this is a lot of things you can discuss about relation model. So we're not going into that detail, but just remember, the data is stored in a table, which is a two-dimensional representation of a relation, and a relation is nothing but you can think of it as a table which stores the data in the form of rows and columns. So, so the relation model is the basis of a relational database management system, RDBMS. In RDBMS, there are two types of operation you can do. One is logical operation, which application or the user will send a command that I need to update this table. They'll tell you what content is required, what action is required. And physical operation, where RDBMS will decide or define or determine how that operation will be carried out in a physically, and how the data will be updated, how the data will be inserted. There are a lot of things that happens in the background. The end user doesn't have to know, or doesn't have to be worried about, uh, doesn't have to worry about how to complete this action. He just have to give a command, I need to update this table. The RDMS in the backend takes care of it, how to be done. So there are a lot of relational database, um, RDBMS in the market. Is Oracle from Oracle Corporation, SQL Server from Microsoft, DB2 from IBM, MySQL is now with Oracle, PostgreSQL, and there are a lot more. Sybase and Informix, uh, but Oracle uh, has more market share right now, followed by SQL Server. So most of the companies, they use Oracle or SQL Server, and there are some companies that use MySQL, PostgreSQL, DB2, and all. There is also another concept called object relational database management system. So ORDBMS here, the object oriented features such as user defined types, inheritance, polymorphism that has been defined in a RDBMS. Oracle also has extended its relational model to an object oriented model. So you can store complex business model in a relational database. You can create a object in your uh, Oracle's PL SQL programming stored in a procedure. You can create a objects and do all sorts of object oriented that you normally do in any other object oriented language. So let's look at the brief history of Oracle database. It started in 1977. It was called Software Development Laboratories, and SDL was later renamed to Relational Software Inc., and then it was renamed to Oracle System Corporation, and finally renamed to Oracle. Right now it is called Oracle Corporation. 1979, first commercial Oracle database was released, and then it was V2, and then there was various upgrade to it: V3, V4, V6, and Oracle 7. 1996 7.3, 1998 they released Oracle 8i, and 2001 9i. I stand for Internet. And 2003 released Oracle 10G. G stand for Grid. Then 11G. 2013 we have 12C. C stands for Cloud, and multi-tenant architecture was introduced in 12C. And in 9i Oracle in 2001 9i Oracle Real Application Cluster was introduced, and we have 18C, 19C, and the latest version that right now we have is 21C. Oracle has already released 21C as well. This information you can find in a Wikipedia page for Oracle. So before moving to what does the Oracle DB do, I need to talk about briefly about this recent release version that Oracle has introduced after 12C. So it's called 19C, 18C, 19C, and 20C. You can see every year Oracle is releasing a new version. So what does that mean? So starting with Oracle year 2018, Oracle started a new versioning number which coincides with the year of the release. So we had 18C release in 2018, 19C release in 2019. I don't think there was a 20C, but 21C was released in 2021. But however, all this 18C, this is in line with Oracle Agile's software development methodologies, where you don't want to wait for 4 or 5 years to release your next version. As you can see, 10G was released in 2003, 11G was released 4 years after that, and 12C was released 6 years after 11G. So because of the every year the technology is changing, and because of the agile software development methodology, you need to be able to deploy your new features to the market as quickly as possible. So it is not a good idea to wait for 5 and 6 years to come up with your next release with a new feature. By then, a lot of the technology might have changed by then. A lot of new technology might have come to the market, and that's where other companies might get an edge. If you want to be competitive in the market, you have to deploy your new features as soon as possible to the market, so you are always ahead of the curve. That's the whole philosophy about agile, and I think Oracle has started following it. So 18C actually is 12.2, 12c is 12.1.0.1. Then there was a 12.1.0.2. 18c is 12.2. 19c is 18c is 12.2.0.2. 19c is 12.2.0.3. And Oracle 19 is a long-term release for Oracle with Premier support. It has Premier support until April 2024 and extended support till 2027. 18c doesn't have that long support cycle. So if you your company should be staying in 19c where they can get Oracle Premier support and extended support as long as possible. 18c is 21c is also not long-term release, but there are no major changes between 12c to 18c to 19c. There are new features they have introduced, but those are not any radical changes that you need to learn 19c all over again, or you need to learn 21c all over again. You just need to learn the new feature that is introduced in 21c, then you should be fine. So next, going to what does the DBA do? See, database administrator, your main focus should be your database should be up and running and will be serving the application and the end user with acceptable performance. The performance should not be very bad. It should be able to retrieve the data and save the data in a acceptable performance level. And your data is protected with well-defined backup strategy. One of the most important job of a DBA is to make sure that the data is backed up and is protected. In case of any disaster, we should be able to restore our data. So these are the core responsibility of a DBA. So the database should be up and running. So that means you need to take care of installation, upgrade, patching, and up and running with a great performance level. That means your database monitoring, tuning should be part of database DBA responsibility. And of course, you need to take care of user management, provide access to users, permission, privileges, roles, and all things like that. Of course, backup recovery. There are utilities available in Oracle where you can take backup and restore the database if required. Disaster management, disaster recovery drill. You need to participate, make sure that your procedure is up to date and available and ready. In case of there's a disaster, you should be able to restore your database in a DR location. And also help application team in SQL query, database connectivity, and database performance. But also remember, in any application, if it is using Oracle database or any other database, if there is any problem with the application, for some reason application is not working the way it should be, in most of the cases they will first contact the DBA to check if database is fine or not. So in most of the cases there may not be a problem with any database. There could be a problem with either an applications or the network or server, things like that. But the first point of contact will always be DBA. So sometimes it is little annoying that anywhere anything goes wrong, people will always come to DBA. And so you need to have some level of idea about how the network works, about server operation, and anything that connects to application or database. You should have a little bit of idea how it is working, so you can troubleshoot in a better way. Then let's go to so that's all for we can also talk we'll all talk about different schema objects and different SQL commands and like a little overview in our next video. And so I think this concludes the first video of this tutorial, and I'll see you on the next video. Thank you. Bye bye.